I think we're going to have to write about the history of survivors and how it happened, but I'll just talk about the recent history, which is that in 2013, when the demonstrations, 2014, these last demonstrations started again, a group of us felt that why had they started doing demonstrations again? Because they'd done them in 97, they'd done them in 2008, and at both of those times, it had been because there was a problem inside the group. There was a power vacuum at the top of the group because of the alleged sexual misconduct of the different deputy leaders of the NKT. So this time round, we saw what they were doing, and the things they were saying against His Holiness were much harsher and much nastier, and we felt that the reason wasn't actually something to do with His Holiness, it was to do with how the group was functioning. So we started to get together and talk about what was happening, what was wrong, what was the difference. We had to function together more as a support group, so we talked to each other. People who left the NKT were sharing how to cope, how to recover, why was Buddhism so confusing? If you left the NKT, why did everything else feel so different? And analysing that, trying to understand it. A person who was really helpful with that was Tenzin Paljo, because he was in the NKT for 5 years, and he had a lot of contact with Tibetan Buddhist teachers, and he could explain all that to us. So how to start studying again. A lot of us couldn't meditate again. A lot of us had panic, that we were threatened by the NKT. People were threatened in different ways. One person, they used the police to try to get him to sign some documents so that he wouldn't be a director of the centre anymore. Lots of online harassment. There was people harassed when they tried to publish books or say their stories, and would threaten them with libel cases. It was like every time we tried to talk, there were these in the community. They also, people don't talk to you. I got threatened inside mental health services when I was having problems and accessing the services. They used the chaplaincy organisation to talk to the top people where I was accessing the services to try to stop me accessing them. So there was all this bullying going on. So we felt that we had to find some kind of way to be able to speak. And we were in contact with Inform, the organisation that studies new religious movements. They're very, very concerned about the new Kadampas, and they're trying to publish on them as well. And they have them in just one leaflet on extremism at universities. So we felt that people were very frightened to talk. So we started the Facebook groups that we need to talk about Shugden, because basically people were so frightened to even mention the name or say anything. And we also felt there was a big need to connect with Tibetans, not just the teachers, but to connect with, what's happening your side, what's happening in the monasteries, what's happening on the ground. So that if there's a crossover of information, we are all much stronger to analyse and to define what the NKT is, so that everybody is in a better position. His Holiness's students, the Tibetan culture, the Tibetan people, and the Westerners who are all caught up in this. So our main emphasis is, one, to analyse using as correct information as we can from inside the NKT, from academics, from all areas, to analyse what the NKT are doing and how they're doing it. The second is to support people who are in the NKT and maybe having a hard time, people who have come out of the NKT and the whole process of leaving. And the other one is the activist side, which is what is new in the last year, because we started to produce leaflets, produce information, because, for instance, a lot of Buddhist groups in England, after the problems in Aldershot when they couldn't even hear His Holiness, a lot of Western Buddhist groups now want to actually be active and talk about the NKT, but they can't. It's extremely difficult to understand. One is how the NKT functions, the other is all the language they're using, there's the Shugden aspect, and the other is how that fits in with Tibetan Buddhism and His Holiness. So you have to understand what's going on, you need to know a lot about all these different areas. So we're looking at finding a language to explain these things in really simple terms so that anyone can understand it and talk to somebody else about it. And we think that's the only way forwards, is to be really accurate, to be grounded, and to have that aspect of it. So we're producing leaflets. We've got the different websites. We're doing another website now, which is going to be extremely simple, just with questions and answers, and then links on to further information, so that anybody can access it at the level at which they want to access it. It is very difficult to leave the NKT, and I think it would be good to also create more connections between people leaving and Buddhist groups and Tibetan groups, so that there's more support between everybody involved in this situation. So the more we can have dialogue, and the more we have understanding of all these different areas and communicate things. And I think sometimes this is terribly complex, and it's terribly emotional and really difficult for nearly everybody involved in it. That's the problem. There's a continual need to be calm, to be centered, to kind of reorient yourself, because it's really difficult to get upset, both about what's happening with His Holiness, what's happening to people inside the NKT, and the level of intensity of the protests is extreme. And the fact that the NKT always seem to function on an edge between the ethical and the legal. They seem to be quite unethical, but just inside the legal. So the legal system of Britain and the US, and how protests can be happening in different places, the NKT are very skillful in understanding how they can go to the edge in every single place. So we need to be just as skillful as them to understand all these different things, so that we can be a force of truth, basically, from what His Holiness says, reason and experience. And so we have to communicate all that between us. That's just my description. So thank you very much. I really do hope that everything gets translated for English people, English-speaking people. So we need to know more about Tibetan Buddhism. I've spent 7 years, I've met the heads of each tradition and asked so many questions with so many people, and I talk to people inside monasteries. It's taken a long time for me to understand Tibetan Buddhism. So my plea is, like I think being said just now, is that more education needs to be around from Tibetan Buddhists towards at least British culture, European culture, much more understanding. I find something very interesting. Many people say, oh, Tibetan Buddhism is very weird, it's very strange. And I say, well, what about the Dalai Lama? The Dalai Lama is wonderful, they say. He's great. And it's like, excuse me, the Dalai Lama is Tibetan Buddhism. So there seems to be a very strange view. Like, here's the Dalai Lama and everybody likes him and what he does. And then, like, the rest of Tibetan Buddhism is as if it's separate and too strange for people. So there needs to be some way of showing how His Holiness is the best of Tibetan culture, and there's no contradiction with these strange things. That strange things are just things that people are not understanding about techniques in Tibetan Buddhism. At least in Britain, it's very Theravada-based. There's a lot of kind of misunderstanding of Tibetan Buddhism. So that's my plea for more understanding going across, understanding about the NKT and how it functions, what it's doing, and how this is very different from how things are set up in Tibetan Buddhism. Thank you so much.